In this episode, Golden and I discuss Obi-Wan Kenobi. Full speed ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power. The Omega Beam.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 177. I'm your host, Oren Merton. So the latest Star Wars series, Obi-Wan Kenobi, is now streaming in its entirety on Disney+, which means it's time for us to discuss it. As with most shows, we start spoiler-free and warn you before we dive deep. So let's go! I am here with Golden to talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi, the latest Star Wars series on Disney+. So, what did you think?
I thought it was good. I think people had really high expectations, and I think that they expected Mandalorian-type feel, and that's not what Obi-Wan is, which isn't saying that it's not still good on its own. It's just I think that people had expectations that weren't being met.
Yeah, I think Star Wars works really well on television, which isn't to say that the movies weren't good. I mean, at least,
4,
three
5,
of them
and
were,
6.
at least 3 of them were amazing. But I think it works great in episodic television, and I think part of that is due to the sort of decompressed storytelling they can do. They can get more into the characters, they can get more into the depth of the world, and I think Westerns just do good on television.
It's a sci-fi Western.
Yeah, this is a Western. If The Mandalorian is Lone Wolf and Cub, this is kind of the last gunfighter. It's basically the last gunfight of the old gunslinger Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I think if that's how you looked at it, and you weren't expecting it to be some kind of extension of the movies or whatever, it was a really fun little 6-episode story. But like you said, I do think some people expected this to somehow be something else. Though
They expected him to go out swinging with, instead of gunslinging, go out and swing with his
lightsaber,
yeah, and that's not where he's at mentally.
Yeah, when we, we'll have a little bit spoiler-free, but the series begins, and you can get this from the trailer. This is after the Clone Wars. This is after the Jedi have been executed, and he's a broken man. I mean, this is not the grand swashbuckling general of the Clone Wars. This is a man who had been, fed a line of goods from the Republic, from the Jedi Order, and everything fell apart. And now he's in a hole in a desert watching a boy, basically. And that's his life. And it's a miserable life, and that's where we find him.
I don't necessarily think that he's miserable. He's just resigned.
Resigned. That's a good term. And that's where we pick up. And we don't pick up with him like, yes, give me, an army and a blaster and a lightsaber and I'm going to go and conquer the universe. No, he's like, everything I tried to do blew up in my face. What do you want from me now? Mm-hmm. And that's where the story picks up. And I think part of it was, I guess, Obi-Wan Kenobi finding his mojo, but it was his mojo is completely changed. It's not the same mojo that it was, and it will never be. I mean, what was not actually everything he thought it was. The dogma of the Jedi ended up getting them destroyed. So I don't think he'd even want to go back to what was. Mm-hmm. I think he needs to find something new. And in effect, the adventure that he's led on is what takes him to something new. And I thought it was good. I thought it was a good story. And of course, the effects are great. Ewan McGregor, we absolutely need to single him out. He carries the show. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful side performances. Kumail Nanjiani is, of course, great in everything. The young lady who played 10-year-old Leia, I hope that wasn't a spoiler.
At this point, I think it's been off social media long enough.
Yeah, I mean, she did a really fun job, and I think the actress, Moses Ingram was fantastic. Even Hayden Christensen, whom I will admit to not particularly liking his character in the prequels, I thought he was fine here. So, certainly all the elements that went into it were really good. I think the story was really well put together. I've often said in these episodes that when a show really sticks the landing, it makes a difference. And boy, some of the middle episodes may have had a little bit, they may have been a little loose, but boy, that ending,
Yeah,
that ending landed.
going into the last episode, it's like, okay, these episodes were not very long. I don't know how they're going to wrap everything up in one episode.
Right.
But they managed to do it.
And in an emotional and a satisfying way. It's not just a perfunctory ending that covers all the bases. It's a really, really solid episode that advances the Star Wars saga, advances the characters, and is just very well written. So, yeah, if you've been wondering if this is worth seeing, I would certainly say yes.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have to jump right into spoilers
3, 2, 1 spoilers.
have any more discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of controversy of, well, how come Leia's message says, you know, you were with my father in the war, and how come she doesn't reference her knowing him? But
they clear that up at the end. At the end, they kind of threw in this line where it says, "You can't tell anybody; it'll put you in danger." So it's like, oh, okay. So I guess that's why she won't tell anybody.
I mean, in Star Wars, Luke's as if he's never met Ben Kenobi, but yet we see that he has.
Yeah.
So maybe he just forgot him. So it's there are little things like that I know that all of the hardcore Star Wars people are gonna be like, oh, what about this? Oh no, you can't do it. I'm like, oh, and just freaking out. And it is what it is. The story's going to change.
The great writer Marv Wolfman, who, if you've listened to a bunch of these, you may recall David Raiklin brought him up in our Doctor Strange episode as a great writer of teleplays and screenplays and comics. He made the statement that continuity is your friend until it isn't. And when it isn't, don't let continuity get in the way of a good story. And I think he's right. I think this honors Star Wars. I think it fits into Star Wars. And you know what? If around the edges, some of the details don't quite line up, it's fine.
It's a lot of fun to see this young Leia knowing who she's going to become.
Right.
Knowing who she's going to become, it makes a lot of sense that she is that woman, knowing this is how she was as a child.
Right. And we have to give the writers a lot of credit for the fact that you know that Leia, Obi-Wan, Darth Vader, we know they can't die because they show up in other movies. So in the hands of lesser writers, that would have taken all the tension out of the story because you know everybody walks away. But instead, they managed to make a really exciting, tense adventure.
Well, even then, you know that Luke can't die.
Right. I mean,
Still are able to make it tense and suspenseful.
Right. And that's one of the things, you know, about the movie Argo. For those of you who saw the movie Argo, it's not necessarily science fiction, but they did pull sci-fi into it in the sense that it's the real dramatization of getting Americans out of Iran when they took our hostages by using a science fiction movie as a cover story. And that's a long ago fact. We know what happened, and yet Ben Affleck and team made a really tense movie.
Yes.
So I think these guys also deserve credit for making it.
I think it is still a quality show.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people are not that happy with it, but I enjoyed it.
You know, I have to say, I normally am so quick to go to Rotten Tomatoes and see what the critics are and what the users say. I have not checked the Rotten Tomatoes of this movie, so I don't actually know if the majority... the show. Thank you. Yeah, of this show. So I don't actually know if the majority liked it or not. At least reported to Rotten Tomatoes. But I would certainly say that as a Star Wars fan myself, it hit the buttons that it needed to hit. And if there's a little, continuity around the edges, it's not something that bothered me in the least.
Well, my guess would have been that critics really liked it and the audience was a little bit lower. And that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
With critics, 83%. With audience, 63%.
All right.
I mean, I definitely would have said that it was fresh because what's nice is it is not exactly like all the other Star Wars series.
Right, exactly.
They are different.
This is not the Mandalorian. This is not a backdoor Mandalorian season.
And it's not Boba Fett.
Yeah. Well, Boba Fett kind of was a backdoor Mandalorian season. But yeah, I think this was its own thing, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to seeing Ahsoka, which is another Star Wars series on the way, Andor, Endor, which is another Star Wars season on the way. I mean, I'm looking forward to these other shows. I think they've proven that they can do Star Wars on television quite well.
Yeah, I haven't really actually done or heard a lot about Andor, but
The trailer it could be interesting.
but it's just, I think the fact that they're making shows different,
Yeah,
that they're not all the same thing, adds more interest.
absolutely.
And if you want to watch a Star Wars show, and you just be open, go in and just enjoy it. Don't be too critical of all of the little details, and just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, and don't get the feeling that like all the little details are wrong. I mean, we're just talking about the kind of super fine minutia that
I'm talking about people that are very critical of Star Wars having to be... And hey, if you're going to go continuity, I love R.A. Salvatore as a writer. I know long ago when he wrote his book, they approached him to write it, and he said, no, I don't want to be remembered as the guy that killed Chewbacca. And his friend called him up and said, just write it. When they ask you to write it, write it. And he wrote it, and I love it. Vector Prime. Great story. But hey, you go back and watch Star Wars, and I went to go watch the Star Wars movies, and I'm like, Han and Leia only have one kid? Huh? Because in the story, they don't. They have more than one child, and Chewbacca dies in the story, but that's not canon in the movies.
It is not canon.
So it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy that book and that I'm going to go into the movies and say, well, they're not like the book and this is messed up. I just enjoy the storytelling.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Golden.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/177. If you liked this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your reviews help people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. Full stop.